I still remember that period of my life as if it were yesterday. A job that once seemed simple and predictable suddenly turned into a series of little wars, where every day you had to either adapt or find a way to fight back. Back then, I didn't yet realize that these situations teach you far more than any dry job description. They harden your character. Let me start from the very beginning. At my previous job, I often had to drive around the city for meetings, and sometimes even leave the county altogether. We were in sales, and I was one of those who spent most of the day not at a desk but behind the wheel. Essentially, my job was built on the road. And for people like me, the company had a convenient reimbursement system. The choice was simple. Either you received a fixed monthly payment, about $40, or you filed reports for every trip and got reimbursed at the standard mileage rate. To be honest, I hated paperwork. Couldn't stand forms, tables, signatures, and all those endless formalities. So I almost always chose the fixed $40. Sometimes I even lost a couple of bucks on that scheme, but I saved myself a ton of nerves and time. Everything changed when a new HR manager came in. A woman with ambitions that clearly outweighed her common sense. Her idea was that the company could save money if we stopped receiving fixed payments and were forced to submit reports for every single trip. At first glance, logical. But only for someone who had never dealt with reality. I kept paying for trips out of pocket if the reimbursement came to less than $20. I just didn't want to bother with the paperwork. But the manager noticed that many employees ignored small amounts. And what did she do? She decided to complicate the process so much that people would stop filing reports altogether. Now, to submit a report, you had to attach additional proofs, Google Maps printouts, and all sorts of minor details. And when the reports piled up, she had to hire a separate person to process all that paperwork. But she didn't stop there. She started rejecting reports if they didn't have two maps, one there and one back. Well, okay, I thought. You want to play bureaucracy? Let's play. I found an old website, something like MapQuest, and began generating routes even for the shortest trips. For example, I'd drive 3 miles to the nearest office, and hand in 15 pages of maps, arrows, and gas station ads. I had already prepared templates for my regular routes. 2 clicks, and done. To get reimbursed for $3, I would attach 10 to 15 pages of printouts. My monthly reimbursements grew to $60. In the end, the HR department had to hire another person just to dig through all that paper. And you know the sweetest part? Before leaving the company, I sent my templates to all my colleagues in sales. Let her drown in paperwork. But that story was only the beginning. Because soon, the same manager decided to crack down on another matter: clothing. We worked at one of the largest banks in the U.S. On Fridays, almost the entire office had the right to come in wearing jeans. It was something of an unwritten tradition, a symbol of casual day. Everyone, except our department. The manager decreed that we must strictly follow the business dress code, even on Fridays. Even though we didn't interact with clients at all. Our job was to process ATM checks. From cash-in-transit bags, dirty and sometimes even wet. Imagine this: you're sitting in a stuffy room, sorting through damp slips of paper, and you're dressed in a business suit. The whole department was, to put it mildly, unhappy. But there was no point in arguing directly. So we decided, if we had to follow the rules, we'd do it literally. That first Friday, I showed up. Well, actually this part of the story is about my colleague, in the most ridiculous outfit you could imagine. But technically, it met the dress code. A pastel floral blouse with wide, brightly striped pants. The manager wasn't there, she was on vacation. The next week, the trick repeated. But this time not alone. The whole department, 15 people, came dressed as if they had picked their outfits blindfolded. Leopard print skirts with plaid blazers, ties with wild patterns, polka-dot blouses paired with pinstriped pants. Yet everything strictly complied with corporate policy. You should have seen the manager's face when she returned. She called us into the conference room and declared that this was unacceptable for a business environment. To which we politely asked her to read aloud the official definition of business attire. It only said, clean, ironed clothes, pants, skirts, dresses, shirts, or blouses. Prohibited items, jeans, t-shirts, torn clothes, tank tops, and sneakers. That's all. I asked a simple question, where does it say that colors have to match? There was no answer. She admitted she needed to consult HR. No one was punished. Formally, the rule stayed. But in practice, things looked very different. Within a week, 2 more departments joined us. And soon, our manager, irritated and exhausted, officially announced, "From now on, you are allowed to wear jeans on Fridays." It was a small but very sweet victory. After the jeans incident, our manager seemed to get a taste for control. She decided it had to be even stricter. One day, a whiteboard appeared in our department, placed prominently for everyone to see. On it was a list of all employees. Next to each name were columns, time out, time back, and reason for leaving the workplace. At first, we treated it with irony. Fine, we'll jot something down if we go see a colleague. But soon it became clear, this was going to be used against us. One time, I went to another department to ask a quick question. When I came back, the manager was already waiting. In front of the whole department, she loudly scolded me for not specifying why exactly I had gone to that colleague. From now on, she said, explain in detail the reason for every exit. Well then. She wanted details, she got them. Next time I went to the restroom, I carefully wrote on the board, going to the toilet. Planning urination and defecation. My co-workers could barely contain their laughter. Then they joined in. One by one, each went to the board and left the same kind of honest notes. One wrote he was going to perform minor relief, another, clear intestinal tract. When we all came back to the office, the manager happened to be standing at the board with another colleague. The look on her face was priceless. No surprise, the board disappeared soon after. But my stories didn't end there. Some time later, I had to temporarily bring part of my things into the office. My wife and I were buying a new house, but it wasn't ready yet. So I lived for a couple of weeks at my mother's place, and my chair, the famous Herman Miller Aeron, I decided to put at work. The standard chairs there were old and uncomfortable, but mine, well, it was a real throne of comfort. After a few days, I noticed that in the mornings my chair was sitting in the conference room. I silently rolled it back. But then I started finding it at our CEO's desk. At first, I thought it was coincidence. But soon the CEO's assistant approached me and said, "You realize you have a better chair than our director? He's worried people might think your desk is his." I laughed and replied, "All right, I won't be part of this competition." That same day at lunch, I simply took the chair to my car. The next day the assistant came up again and asked, "Where's the chair?" I answered seriously, "Well, since it was inappropriate for the office, I put it away in my car. From then on, the chair lived in my trunk. And every day, colleagues walking by my car would see it there. The CEO never raised the issue again. And I got quiet satisfaction. Technically I hadn't defied anyone, but I'd made my point clear. Now let's rewind a little. Back in May 2004, I had just started teaching high school math. Beginners rarely get lucky, so instead of a proper classroom, I was given a temporary portable, essentially, a trailer. The main problem was Florida's climate. In summer, the heat is brutal, and the AC in my trailer barely worked. To make it worse, the insulation had been damaged by a hurricane. Inside it was hotter than outside. I couldn't stand it and moved classes outdoors. For several days, we had lessons under the open sky. But the vice principal saw us and summoned me. "Why are classes being held outside the classroom?" I explained it was unbearable inside. "Teach in the assigned room," was his response. Well then, they wanted by the book? Fine. I went to a hardware store and built a simple DIY air conditioner, a tub with water and ice, a pump, copper tubing, and a fan. It blew cool air through the room. The students loved it. They nicknamed me the Mad Scientist. But it didn't last. Parents started calling the school, saying their kids were being taught in an experimenter's lab. I was called in and told to dismantle it immediately. But the very next day, a brand new AC unit was installed in my trailer. Of course, a few weeks later, my contract wasn't renewed. The official reason: I had made the school look bad. Funny enough, years later my son attended that very same school. And you know what? They still use the same trailers. At another job, we had a colleague who could best be described by Homer Simpson's words: "Everyone works harder when I'm around." He was a master at shifting responsibility onto others. His projects were always stalling, he constantly missed deadlines, failed to complete tasks, and violated safety protocols. But management turned a blind eye: no mistakes, everything works. In reality, things worked only because we were always cleaning up after him. The last straw came when he tried to blame us, his own team, for the delays. That's when we all collectively stopped covering for him. Each of us simply started doing our own share of work and nothing more. His mistakes quickly became obvious. While he was on vacation, we sorted out all the backlog and finished everything on time. When he came back, chaos broke out. Within a couple of weeks, he was fired. The irony was that after he left, there was less work, not more. But here's another story from the same category, about on-call duty. I worked in the IT department. There were about 20 of us, with 2 specialists for each area. By law, they couldn't force us to be available 24/7, so there was an arrangement: someone volunteered to be on call and got paid €500 a month. I was a newcomer and wasn't included in the on-call list. But management still assumed that if something went wrong, they could just call me. Without any compensation. When the system crashed, they called me. I refused. I changed my number, gave it only to my teammate, and listed my parents' number in HR. And then the moment came. My teammate went on vacation, and I spent a peaceful weekend. The company's systems collapsed, and they had to call in an external specialist. On Monday, I was summoned and officially added to the on-call list. From that point on, nobody questioned me again. And finally, an army story. I served in a tank crew. My position was gunner, the most interesting job. I fired the main cannon. The crew also included the loader, the driver, and the commander. We lived in the tank, slept in it, ate side by side. It brings you close together, whether you want it or not. Our driver was someone you didn't want to deal with. Rude, irritable, and on top of that, a bad driver. He handled the tank so poorly that the commander nearly broke his ribs, and I almost got a black eye when we hit a hole during gunnery practice. After the exercises came maintenance day. Normally, you did it together, drivers with drivers, loaders with loaders. But we had only one crew. I asked the driver to help me clean the gun barrel. That's a job for at least 3 people. He replied, I don't want to see you or hear you. All right then. I found another soldier, and we managed. I finished the rest of my work quickly and even helped the loader with the machine guns. We were ready to leave before lunch. But the driver was left alone with his tasks. Track tensioning, bolts, lubrication, all of it requires at least 2 people. He struggled until nightfall. In the end, he lost his entire day off. Did his behavior change after that? No. But at least justice was served that time.